I'm Emma-Louise Coffey and you're welcome to The Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. On this week's episode of The Dairy Edge, Mark Plunkett gives us his top tips on how to lift soil fertility and grow more grass in 2019. But first, I asked him about the 2018 National Soil Fertility Report.
If we maybe look back a little bit, maybe in the last 10 years, Emma-Louise, I suppose up until 2016, we had seen little improvement in terms of soil fertility. The majority of our soils were, there was approximately 10% of our soils optimum for PK and lime. But since 2015, we have seen very good improvements in terms of soil pH. Mainly in the tillage areas and also on dairy farms, and that has resulted in that there's approximately 20% of our soils with optimum PK and lime on tillage farms, and dairy has grown to 18% in 2018.
You mentioned lime, say pH, and that's obviously coming from lime. Is there a huge increase in the level of lime spreading across the country?
Well, I suppose we're getting sort of a double dividend in terms of lime, in terms of soil fertility. Firstly, it's improving the soil pH, and also it's improving soil P levels. We have seen, I suppose, early indications or positive improvements in terms of soil P, and also good improvements in 2018. Now, it's only 1 year improvement. But getting back to the usage of lime, yes, most definitely we have seen a significant increase in the use of lime in the last 5 years. The usage has increased by approximately 200,000 tonnes per year compared to the previous 5 years. And I suppose that's by applying the extra lime, we ran a campaign back in 2013 with a focus to improve lime along with P and K, and most definitely both advisors and the industry have taken the lime message on board. I say we are now seeing good improvements since about 2016 in soil pH levels.
And I suppose on a practical level, if we look at lime and pH, what does it actually mean, say, where you have optimum pH in soils? Like what is the reason behind it, and I guess what are the benefits when the soil is at the correct pH?
I suppose the first one is nutrient availability. Lime, by maintaining the pH at say 6.3 on mineral soils, we increase the availability of soil nitrogen, so we get more nitrogen cycling in those soils in terms of it's more biologically active, so we can release up to 80 kilograms of N per hectare per year. Like we're using both the organic nitrogen in terms of slurry and also bag fertilizer more efficiently. The second, I suppose, big area, Emma-Louise, is phosphorus. Phosphorus is quite sensitive to soil pH, and by again maintaining our soils in that neutral zone, we can actually make more soil phosphorus available. We can actually increase the availability of the soil P. And secondly, we also increase the efficiency of use of bag and organic P as well. And I suppose the resultant effect is that we can grow more grass by basically increasing the availability of such major nutrients as N, P and K. And we're looking at a production gain there of about a tonne of dry matter per hectare per year by just maintaining the pH in that optimum range of 6.3 on pH 6.3 on mineral soils.
And I guess, when we reflect on spreading lime and the cost of it, it's so cheap. It's nearly an open goal in terms of achieving higher grass production on farms. And when we move on then to soil P, and, you've mentioned that improving pH status on farms will improve, I suppose, the soil P availability. But there's been some new regulation around phosphorus. Can you explain what that would mean for farmers?
Yes, Emma-Louise, in 2017, the Nitrates Directive was reviewed, and again, there was major changes around the P limits. I suppose the big change was that slurry is now removed from the P calculation, from the whole farm P chemical allowance. That's quite significant. Like, it's given us back about between 8 and 11 kilograms of P per hectare, depending on what part of the country you are in. I suppose the other big change there, where we put slurry back, where we target slurry on soil P indices of 1 and 2, its availability is reduced by 50%. And again, that allows us to bring in more chemical phosphorus onto the farm. Like, for example, if we take a farm stocked at 2 livestock units per hectare, we can bring in an additional 4 kilograms of P per hectare, and that will be quite significant in 2019. I suppose the other big change there is that for intensive grass-based livestock farms, we have additional phosphorus in terms of soil P buildup. So again, if these are for farms where there's a big demand for grass and we're trying to build soil P levels rapidly, there is an additional 30 kilograms of P per hectare at index 1 and 20 kilograms of P per hectare at index 2. And again, quite significant for the current year, where there will be limits in terms of farm P allowances.
And like if we consider a farm that's in, say, soil index 1 or 2 for phosphorus, and there's those higher build up allowances, what sort of impact will we see in terms of say additional grass production?
Again, in terms of additional grass production, we're looking somewhere in the region of about between an index 1 and an index 3 in terms of soil P. We're looking at somewhere in the region of 1.5 to 2 tons of extra grass dry matter per hectare per year. So it's quite a significant lift in terms of production, where we use the additional P to build soil P levels over the next 3 years.
And I suppose we can't underestimate the importance of P for our soils. Listening to Stan Lawler at the Grassland Conference, he mentioned that, if you think of soil fertility as the engine of your car, P is the ignition, and that's what kickstarts everything. So it's really, really important in our soils.
Absolutely. P is very, very important in the springtime in terms of kickstarting grass growth, very, very important in terms of tillering and rooting. And absolutely, it's the ignition that drives production in terms of grass production.
Have you a comment to make on, we would have fed a very high level of concentrate feed on farms. What way will that affect our P allowances for 2019?
Yes, that's a very valid point, Emma-Louise. In 2018, we fed significantly more concentrate feed, especially in the east and the south, and that's going to impact or reduce the chemical farm P allowance, because every ton of meal that's brought onto the farm, there's a 5 kilogram of chemical P deduction in terms of the whole farm P allowance. So currently, it will be very, very important to complete a farm fertilizer plan, to calculate exactly how much chemical P is available in 2019. And it will be important to target slurry to the index 1s and 2s to increase the chemical P allowance, as we discussed earlier. And also maybe some farmers should be considering applying for the extra soil P in terms of P buildup, where high levels of meal have been fed in 2018.
And then if we take a look then at potassium levels, what sort of potassium levels are we seeing on dairy farms across the country?
Again, we're seeing that the majority of our soils is at index 1 and 2, and up until this year, especially on dairy farms, the index 1 soils had increased by 50% since 2014. And I believe we are growing more grass, we're utilising more grass, and it tends to be, I think, where the reason for this decline in soil K is that we're taking off high quality bale silage, and we're possibly not putting back, the correct level of potassium, especially because there is significant removal of K in that high quality bale silage. Like, for example, if we take, say, 4 bales of silage off, we'd want to be returning somewhere in the region of 1,000 to maybe 1,200 gallons of good quality cattle slurry to ensure that our K levels remain in check or in balance.
And I guess my next question then for you, you've answered some of it in terms of how much we need to put back on based on our offtake. There's a much higher offtake from bales versus, say, cows grazing. Why is that?
Correct. Well, if you think about it, the animal is recycling the majority of P and K back through the dung and urine, where if you take out, you remove the grass, you're removing, significant amounts of both P and K, either in as bale silage, like just to give you a figure there, like every ton of dry matter, there's approximately 4 kilograms of P and 25 kilograms of K per ton, so. Where we cut the grass silage, we're removing the whole crop and also removing significant P and K in that crop.
And I suppose to be super critical about it, Mark, if we look at what you're saying, that there's more soil falling into the category of 1 and 2. Like, is it acceptable where we have no limitation really on what K we spread? Is it acceptable for us to be so low when we look at potassium levels?
Well, I think we need to look at maybe from 2 angles. The first one, maybe the grazing ground. If we are intensely stocked, pushing grass production, we most definitely should be at index 3 in terms of growing that grass and utilizing the nitrogen as efficiently as possible. If we're maybe lowly stocked, maybe not as intensive, possibly index 2 is fine in terms of the system. But the other side of the coin is that on the silage ground, I would strongly advocate that we should be at index 3, whether we're intensive or lowly stocked, because we want to maximize grass silage, and we want to maximize the winter fodder, in that first cut as efficiently as possible. So on the silage ground, most definitely index 3, that's where we should be. And as you say, there's no limits in terms of K, in terms of what we can apply as we have with phosphorus.
And finally then, Mark, if we just consider the year ahead, some people will have maybe 1/3 of their ground covered with slurry and 2/3 covered with their early urea. For their year going forward, what are your top tips for farmers to optimise and get full value out of, I suppose, fertiliser and soil fertility?
Well, I suppose my top tip, Emma-Louise, would be number 1. As we speak, we should be all aiming to complete a farm fertilizer plan. We need to figure out, where the slurry needs to go in terms of using it as efficiently as possible. And then, preparing a list of suitable fertilizers. And on the grassland side of the house, if we think of the grazing ground, we should be really looking for something like an 18-6-12 type product. And for our silage ground, in the absence of slurry, we should be aiming for something like an 07-30 to ensure that we fertilize and balance those crops adequately for 2019.
That's great. Thank you, Mark.
That's okay, Emma-Louise.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to Mark Plunkett for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.